Here we are, the first episode of After Hours. Isn't this exciting? I'm your host, Alan John, and over the course of the series, I'm going to speak to the faculty members of MACE department, and not just about mechanical engineering. This podcast will bring your professor's legends out of the dark to the public and allow us to walk through their path with them. And we couldn't have a better first guest. Head of the MACE department and Richard W. Christer Distinguished Professor, Anthony Jacobi. Professor Jacobi has been in Illinois since 1992, before all the current undergrads were even born. Today, most of us first met him in the ME 290 class, where he would invite friends and alumni to join the lecture and give us insights of the industry and the institutions. We had a nice conversation over Zoom on a casual Friday afternoon, and I have to say, there were so many things happened in his path that I couldn't ever imagine, and I believe neither will you. But don't take my words for it. Have a listen for yourself.
My name's Professor Anthony Jacobi. I've been at the University of Illinois since 1992. Before that, I was at Johns Hopkins. And before that, I was a student at Purdue.
Okay. So I remember last time I saw you giving a lecture was at ME 290. Well, I think it's 2 years ago. Yeah, it's definitely one of the most interesting class I've taken here since like it's just directly hitting the career perspective, and it's basically everything outside of like pure like theory or knowledge basis. Everything just focused on the career path.
Yeah.
So yeah, because of that, I really want to like ask you about like so when and how did you know this career this career right now for you is exactly what you wanted?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but I'll tell it. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and grew up in southern Indiana. My family had a farm in central Kentucky and spent a lot of time there as a boy, working with my dad. And I remember the first time this idea, it must have been sort of planted in me without me knowing it. I was 10 or 12 years old and on my grandmother's back porch, and she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I replied, an engineer. And she laughed and she said, why do you want to drive trains? And I said, no, no, not that kind of an engineer like my dad. And she laughed again and she said, Tony, your father is not an engineer. He's a machinist and a farmer. And this was news to me. I was very confused about what engineering was at that point. Then the next time I remember this topic coming up was after I had taken the college entrance exams in high school, and I was sent to visit with a guidance counselor, and he asked me what I wanted to do, what I wanted to study, or what I wanted to do, and I replied I didn't know. And then he leaned back in his chair and said, gee, with these math scores, you could become an engineer. And so I had no idea what math had to do with engineering because that was not my view of engineering. But that was it. That sent me off to Purdue, where I started a BSME. And my first year was not very successful. They didn't kick me out, but I decided that I didn't want to be an engineer. And instead, I changed my degree objective to a 2-year degree in mechanical engineering technology with the plan to become a draftsman.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And so that's what I did. I finished my degree and I became a draftsman, and I was a contract draftsman for DuPont in Louisville. And after about a year of working as a draftsman and seeing what engineers did, uh, my view of engineering was that they drank a lot of coffee and had nice offices. And so I decided, well, I want to go back to Purdue. And I applied for readmission, and they declined my application. And I made an appointment to go see the associate head for undergrad programs at Purdue. His name was Bob Fox, Robert Fox. And Professor Fox met with me, and he told me, he looked at my freshman grades, and he said, I was not a very serious student my freshman year, to be clear. He said, I think you made a good decision by transferring to technology. That's the right place for you. And so, I'm not going to readmit you. And then he dismissed me. And I went back to Louisville, and after thinking about it for a week or so, I called him, got another appointment. He agreed to see me. And I went back and told him that I wasn't serious as a freshman, and I'm serious now, and I want to be an engineer. And he said, I don't think you have what it takes to be an engineer, and I'm not going to admit you. Clearly your freshman year, you're not up to it. And he dismissed me again. And after a week or so, I called to get another appointment, and his secretary wouldn't give me an appointment.
Yeah.
And so I asked her if there was a day that I could catch it. Basically, I was desperate, and I talked this secretary into telling me where his last meeting of the day was on a certain day. Now, it was a 3.5-hour drive between.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, Louisville to Purdue, that's a long drive. Because I've been to Louisville like last spring break, and it was a long drive. And back then, cars weren't that fast. And
well, it wasn't that long ago, but yeah. So it was 3.5 hours each way, and I made the third trip, and I sat in the hallway outside of this meeting room where he was having a meeting. And when the meeting ended, the door opened and he stepped out, and he looked down and saw me sitting in the hallway, and he said, "You again?" And I said, "Yes, Professor Fox." And I didn't get my first sentence out, I think. And he said, "It's against my better judgment, and I'm sure you're going to fail, but I'm going to let you back in." So he let me back in. And actually, that's the moment that I knew I wanted to be an engineer, when I had to fight to get back into engineering school. So that's how I became an engineer.
Wow, that's a great story. So from there, you just I think that's 1981, 1982, around that time.
That would have been 1981, 82. That would have been 1982, I think, when I went back. So I put in a year, and then I did a year in technology. And then I went back and I finished, I think it was 2 years it took me to finish. I graduated in 84, that much I remember.
Wow.
And my second time around, when I was a serious student, my grades were much better. And so as I was finishing, I was thinking about getting a master's degree. I wanted to get a master's degree, but I had worked as a student because I had also taken out student loans. So by the time I finished, I was just really crispy. I was, done. And so I took a job to pay off debts and to rest. And I went to work for Harris Corporation in Melbourne, Florida. Yeah. And that was a great place to work for me. They were doing work that I felt was important. It was interesting. And it was technically challenging. And that's what I really liked about it. And the other thing was, so they allowed me to get a master's while I was working with them. And so that's a hard way to do it. I think it's not the greatest way to do it, but it worked for me. So I was working and doing my master's, and it was a time when I made a little bit of money and paid off some debts. And then as that time wrapped up, I decided that I wanted to go back and get a PhD. I had this secret that I hadn't shared with anyone, that I thought I wanted to be a professor. And
that's at what moment did you have that thought just coming up? Or
yeah, so it's weird. After I got back into Purdue, the first course that I took was a summer course in statics. And the professor was a guy named Goldschmidt, Professor Goldschmidt. And he had what I regarded as a beautiful accent. He spoke with a Spanish accent, and he looked like he was having fun teaching statics. Now, this is quite a trick, to have fun teaching people how things don't move. I mean, that's what statics is. This is how things don't move. And he seemed to enjoy it. And I thought, gee, this looks like a really fun job. This guy seems to be having fun. And so that was the first moment, but I didn't articulate it to anyone because, my college career, the first year was abysmal. And after that, it was okay. But, it didn't look like I was professor material at that point.
Wow. So, that's why you took the master's degree in Central Florida?
Yeah, I took the master's degree because I knew I wanted something beyond the bachelor's degree. I just loved learning. And then as I was finishing the master's, I thought, well, I'll try to go back to Purdue and get my PhD. Going anywhere else did not occur to me. And so I applied, and Goldschmidt called me on the phone, and
Wow.
he said he had I had worked as a grader, and I had worked in his laboratory simultaneously because I was poor, and he had helped me a lot, financially and academically. So he called me and he said he had a position in his lab if I wanted to come work as a PhD student in his lab, and that's what I did. I went back and worked with him.
So during your PhD time, you were focusing with more static studies, or?
No. He had taught statics, but his area was heat transfer and thermodynamics.
Okay.
And my work in his lab had been on heat transfer.
Heat transfer, yeah.
Yeah. So when I went back to Purdue, my graduate research was focused on heat transfer. And that's what I didn't really know what research was. I mean, I had an inkling, but I was learning about research, and I was learning that professors don't only teach statics, and so.
Yes.
And I did become convinced in those few years that I was at Purdue that I wanted an academic career. Academic careers it was competitive. It was really competitive. And so my approach to getting an academic career was a little unusual. I built a database of all the PhD granting universities in the United States in mechanical engineering, and I wrote computer programs to generate mass mail. I had a mass mail system set up. And as I was getting close to graduating, I first sent my application blindly to every institution in my database that I didn't think I wanted to work at. This was like, my strategy was, first I'll apply to the places that I wouldn't work at, even if I had a chance, and I use them to build my interview skills and get ready. And then I would start applying successively to the ones that were more and more desirable to me. And the first round of rejections from schools that I didn't want to work at was pretty hard to take, because basically these were places that I didn't want to work, telling me they didn't want me to work there.
Yeah, I get that feeling as like, a lot of undergrad student like me, when we are applying, we sometimes use a similar strategy as like, oh, well, I'll just practice my interview skill, and then you realize that, well, you're not even getting the interview chance. Yeah, like, oh, well, that's kind of harsh.
Yeah.
And they all reply with those like very generic email, like, maybe you should just change your name. Sometimes not even your name, just like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, it's just, yeah, definitely harsh from that perspective view. Wow. So, so you graduated in 1989 in Purdue, and you, I see from your website, you went to Johns Hopkins.
Right. Yeah. So I interviewed at lots of places, some of which I decided already that I didn't want to work at, but I did get a lot of interviews eventually. And one of them was at the University of Illinois. And that was the place I wanted to go, but they didn't offer me a job. Johns Hopkins offered me a job. And so I went to Hopkins in 89, went to Hopkins in 89. And then I started to have some measure of success, early measures of success at Hopkins. And I had this, so much of life seems random, but I went to a professional conference in Indianapolis, as it happens. I was living in Baltimore at the time. And one morning I went to a coffee shop that was near the conference site, and I had a cup of coffee, and I read the conference program and decided what technical session I wanted to go listen in on, and finished my coffee and got up and started walking down the hallway to go to that session, when I saw a fellow who I knew was a professor at Illinois from my interview. I recognized him, and he recognized me. And he stopped me in the hallway and asked me how things were going, and we chatted for 5 minutes. Now, if I had delayed and drank my coffee a little longer, I would not have bumped into him. But I did. And then after I got back to Baltimore, Tad Addy, who was the head at Illinois at that time, called me and said, we have a faculty opening, and would you be interested? And I came very close to saying no, thank you, because, I had tried to go to Illinois and they turned me down. It was kind of like, I felt like a jilted lover or something. I don't know. I was emotional about it. I thought, no, if I wasn't good enough for you then, now that I'm being successful, why should I go?
Yes.
And anyways, I guess that was kind of stupid, but real reaction. I did react that way. And after thinking about it for a day or so, I called him and said, yes, I would like to come interview. And so I went and interviewed, and it went well. And then I got a job offer. And the move from Hopkins to Illinois was easy for me. At Hopkins, I was the only heat transfer person in the department. It was a small department. And at Illinois had this long legacy in my research area that was like, that was the place. And so it was a pretty easy move for me to make. And I'm glad that I did. It was good for me for my career.
So that was one of the reasons at the beginning you want to go to UY, because the history of the wow.
Yeah. Illinois was well known in the area. They had some of the leading figures in the nation were here at Illinois. And so that was one of the attractions. The other was that they had just founded a research center, an NSF research center in my area. And so, I wanted to get engaged in that center. So when they turned me down the first time, it was hard to take. I was like, I visited the campus, and Illinois' campus is much nicer than Purdue's. And Illinois as an institution is just a much nicer place. Illinois is a university, a true university, and Purdue is kind of like an A&M. It's all, engineering dominates.
Yeah.
But the culture of Illinois just was such a good fit for me. I was really disappointed, and I'm glad it worked out. But at the time, I was happy at Hopkins at the time.
Wow. So from Illinois, you've stayed here since 1992. That's wow. That's 28, almost 29 years now.
Yeah, I didn't. So I stayed here, but it's not like I didn't stay here passively in a sense. So I had offers to go other places. I was offered a position at Purdue. I don't remember exactly when, but in the 90s, late 90s maybe, and mid late 90s. And I almost went. So Tad had recruited me to Illinois, and Tad convinced me to stay at Illinois when Purdue made me an offer. And I'm really grateful for everything. He really got my career going here at Illinois. And then another time, I don't remember the exact timing, maybe 10, 15 years after that, I was a full professor at the time. And I was going through a time in my life, and things were happening in my life where I thought I needed a forest fire, just to kind of restart. And so I came very close to moving to Hong Kong.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the end, at the end of the day, I just decided to stay at Illinois, and I'm glad I did. But I was just at the edge of going to Hong Kong for a while.
Wow. So were you like what happened during the time? Is too many things going on and facing the sort of like just in the same spot for too long, or?
No, it wasn't that. It was in my personal life. So professionally, I never felt like Illinois was enabling to me always. I mean, this is the kind of a place that supports, I believe it supports you in ways that allow you to reach your potential. And Illinois had always done that for me. It was other things that were going on that I just thought, well, I needed a fresh start in my personal lives. But no, Illinois, and I'm glad I stayed because Illinois has continued on in that way in my life, in my professional life. Always, the colleagues here that I've had have always been supportive. The infrastructure here, the culture, the students here. If I had gone to Hong Kong, I would have gotten good students, I'm sure. But the students at Illinois are just amazing, really amazing. I can't count the times that I have been talking to a student and realized that they were way smarter than I am. It's just a place that draws the very best of people. And that's been a real privilege, being surrounded by those people for, as you noted, a long time.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure that like from our perspective view, students must be happy that you've been here, because without your summer lecture in 290, we wouldn't see a lot of the insights in our future. So I guess my next question is, so you're through your career, it seems like you're being around the Midwest or the Rust Belt, the central east or central west, I don't know the geography, but this part of US for a long time, and you've been through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the rise and the fall of the technology and manufacturing and new coming internet technology. So, what's your perspective on the MACE industry in especially the Midwest area after you're seeing the beginning of a lot of the manufacturing job coming up and sort of a lot of those companies are gone and even to us it's like I think one of the questions that for us is just we are not exactly sure where MACE is going in the future because in the beginning it was just a lot of gears, a lot of drawing, technical, static stuff. Nowadays, a lot of CADing, and then soon to becoming everyone has to learn a lot about ECE stuff, Arduino, all the stuff. It's just becoming the line just seems to be becoming more and more blurry in the future.
Yeah, I see that, and I understand your perspective on it, but there are parts of it that keep me very, very optimistic about mechanical engineering and engineering mechanics as disciplines. One is that so electrical engineering is a fine discipline, I suppose. But it's more narrow than mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering has a breadth that almost none of the other disciplines have. I mean, we span from biomechanics to the thermal sciences to controls and autonomy to design and materials and machining and manufacturing and areas that I've missed in my quick list. I mean, this is a very broad discipline, and I think that's one of the big strengths. So you can finish a degree in mechanical engineering, and you're positioned to go work in a wide range of industries, from robotics to power plants, and I think that's a strength. And I think other things that are changing. Indeed, some of the disciplinary boundaries are blurred, but I think that's healthy. I think our discipline is positioned better than most to take advantage of those blurry lines. It's much harder, let's say, for someone from ECE to go work as a thermodynamicist than it is for a
Yes,
thermodynamicist.
to work as
Okay,
easy.
so
Yes.
that flexibility is really an advantage, and I think it puts us in good shape. Now, with respect to the Midwest in general, um, I didn't really regard myself, let's say, as a Midwesterner as I grew up and went off to college. I had grown up mainly in the hills of Kentucky,
Yes.
um, squirrel hunting and stuff like that. And it was, I don't think I had been north of Floyd Knobs, Indiana until I went to Purdue. I'm not positive about that, but when I got north of Floyd Knobs and I discovered that Indiana is a flat state, I I was stunned. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So, and wherever you grow up, the places that you grow up, they leave a mark on you in some way
Yeah,
or another.
absolutely.
Even at my age, I still have that mark. But I'm really comfortable in the Midwest. I think it's a great place to be. I think it's a great place to work and raise a family. Um, I think there's a lot of potential in Illinois. I think Chicago is a dynamic, vibrant place, but our profession and our training would allow you to go anywhere you want to go. If you want to go to Hong Kong, you can go to Hong Kong. It's, that's not beyond your reach. If you want to go to Silicon Valley, if you want to go to Boston, if you decide that you want to go to if you decide you want to go to Hodgensville, Kentucky, you might have a difficult time finding your way as a mechanical. But generally, if you decide you want to go to the East Coast or the West Coast or the South, wherever, this is a profession that you'll be able to take with you and go there and do it. And so I think the Midwest is unique in some ways, but what we do here enables our students to go wherever they want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even in Louisville, there's a lot of beer manufacturing company that will gladly hire a mechanical engineer. So, oh, and yeah, in respective of the MACE education industry, and what do you think about the recent pandemic and how it's going to influence the future in MACE field and especially education wise?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely having a near-term impact, and all of you and we faculty have felt it. Um, and that I think that near-term impact wasn't good. I mean, sort of pivoting into online when we weren't really ready for it, and neither were the students. That was a big challenge, but we faced that challenge and we got through it and we did it. And was it as good as being in person and normal? No, it wasn't. But we managed. And then, this semester, I think things are better. We still are struggling. I mean, MECSE is the curriculum in both in ME and in engineering mechanics, both have a lot of hands-on work. And it's difficult to do that remotely, impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's been a big challenge. And so there is a near-term impact that's not good. The impact on students who are here now trying to get through the program has been one of challenge. However, and for faculty as well, I think that once we return to some sort of normal, a new normal, I think, where we're able to work in person, side by side, hand by hand in the laboratory, that actually we will be better. We have learned to do some things during the pandemic that actually improve our best practices. And the way that we deliver content online, for example, I think over this last year and over the coming 6 months is likely to be much better than it ever was before. And I think we will continue to use some of that delivery. I don't think we'll do it like we are now, and we will have classes in person and we will have labs in person, but there might be elements of the curriculum that we recognize are more effectively delivered in a different way because of the pandemic. And we might be able to leverage our resources through those new best practices to grow enrollment so that we can have a larger population of students, to grow our MEng program so that we can help students get advanced degrees more effectively. So I think there are things that will be good out of this, and let's look for that. Let's look for the things that we can improve on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even before pandemic, there's a lot of efforts done by the institution that put a lot of the resource virtually online, but it was never under so much pressure or so many server uses that we don't truly know how effective they are until like now that they're truly under pressure, and we have to see, like, we have to get rid of the part that's not working and find out how it works in the future.
Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
we still have a lot of learning to do on that, and that's fine. We're learning. Sometimes you learn better under pressure, and that's what the pandemic has done for us.
Yeah. So, Professor, beyond the just your professional career and your academic career, what are some of your hobbies on free time? I'm sure you don't have much free time, but when you have free time, or like passing in the past through all these years, any hobbies?
So back in my teenage years, I had a cousin who had a 1974 MGB, and many years ago, at a family reunion, he told me he had that car all through high school, and then he got married right after high school. He parked the car and let it sit for decades in a field. And he told me he was going to have that car hauled off to a junkyard. And I asked him if I could have it, and I transported it back up to Central Illinois, and I rebuilt it from bare metal up.
Wow.
And I decided to upgrade the engine. So that car, when it was original, it had a 1.8 liter four-cylinder that generated about 95 horsepower. And I upgraded it to a Ford 302, bored over to 306 roller engine with Summit racing equipment on it, generating about 360 horsepower.
Wow.
And put a T5 transmission and a 3.9 rear end in it. And that's my hobby. I drive that car and tinker with that car. I have a young daughter, and we strap in and we turn on Rush and we go cruising through the county roads of Champaign County.
And that car still functioning today?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
It's in good shape. So
that's amazing.
It's like a new car, actually, and And it means a lot to me because it was my cousin's, and also because of so much sweat that I put into
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I'd imagine that's a lot of work to put in a in a 70s car like that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's really an unreasonable amount of work and effort to put into a car like that. But it was it was a work of passion, and that's what most of my, if I have spare time, it goes toward that. When the weather is good, when the weather is bad, I don't get time out in it.
Yeah, and I imagine like for a car like that, I'm sure they stopped production for that, so it would be ridiculously hard to find like parts to repair and replace some of the old parts.
Well, so the suspension has been rebuilt and upgraded because
Uh-huh.
the V8 weighs about 50 pounds more than so the old engine was a cast iron engine, and it's been replaced with a modern engine. So those parts aren't hard to get, and you would be amazed. So they stopped production of that car in 79, I think, maybe
Oh, wow.
78. And but there were a lot of them in the US, and so there are lots of places you can go online to buy any part for that car, and they're not expensive. The parts are not expensive, and you can get anything you need for that car. So when I restored it, I bought a new interior, new carpeting, new seats,
Hmm.
and a new dashboard. So anything that you want, you can get.
Wow.
Um, it's really amazing.
Wow, that's wow, that is so cool. Like I'm me myself, I'm very into cars and stuff, and but I mean, what I've seen is mostly modern cars, and I can't really get into the old cars because I just always thought that it would be so hard to fix a car like that and find
Oh,
like replacement parts for that. Yeah.
no, no. Actually, these old cars are much simpler. They're
Wow.
easy to work on compared to the modern cars. Now, the thing that my wife doesn't like is, the safety features in
Oh,
1974.
yeah,
You know,
well, way worse.
yeah, yeah. The seat belt has a shoulder strap, and that's the extent of
Oh,
the safety features. So I don't drive it fast when I have my daughter with me. I actually, if in case my insurance agent hears this, I never really.
okay, yeah, absolutely. Do they even have an airbag or something?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
wow, wow. Um, so yeah, I think that comes to our last question. So, Professor, you've been living here for, at this point, almost 30 years. What's it like living in Champaign-Urbana area and being like coming from like a professor and then actually becoming a townee, as like we undergrad call them townee, all the people living here, and see the the all the buildings start building up right now, and like how's it been to like living here for 30 years? It's got to be like so different.
Yeah, it's changed a lot since the time that I came here. Um, we Champaign Urbana has actually now a skyline. If you drive from a distance, you can
Oh
see the
wow.
city before you get here. And when I moved here, it wasn't like that. Um, I like living here. So, it's hillier than you think. When you're driving out in the countryside, not very fast.
Mhm.
The hills, it's hilly. There's topography there. It's just more subtle than in Colorado. Uh, I like it. I don't like the dead cold of winter. This right now is my most
Yeah,
unfavorable
it's
part. Yeah.
horrible weather,
Yeah.
Midwest.
The wind is just biting.
Yeah.
Um, I lived in Florida for a while. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed my time in Baltimore. I loved the hills of Kentucky, but I like it here. This is a really nice place to live, a wonderful place to raise a family. The people here are. I can give you an example. So
Mhm.
when I was living in Baltimore, when I would go to the grocery store, the clerk who was selling me groceries would
Mhm.
act like they were doing me a tremendous favor to sell me groceries. When you tried to go up onto the highway, you go up the merge ramp, traffic closes so that you can't make it in Baltimore. At
Yeah.
least that's the way it was when I lived there. It's a population density thing. The more
Mm.
higher
Yeah.
the population density, the more rude the people. Well, that's not life here. Life here is that people are genuinely friendly to you. When I go to the grocery store, I have conversations with the grocery clerk, and they're friendly and meaningful. When I go onto the highway, traffic moves over to let me onto the
Wow.
highway. The rate of entropy generation living in Champaign is very low compared to Baltimore.
The low density of population here, I'd
Yeah,
imagine. Yeah.
it's just it's a nice place to live.
Yeah. So where do you go for grocery shopping?
Well, these days I only go wherever everyone is wearing an N95 mask or a gas mask or something. I'm
Yeah.
really trying to be really super careful. So I don't go for much grocery shopping these days. I do go out and go grocery shopping. I go to Schnucks. I go to Meijer. Sometimes I go to Sam's. I like Sam's because they'll bring the groceries out to my car. So I'm careful, and I'm going places where I can be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Chinook is like the most tawny place to go buy grocery. I think that most students don't even know this place existed. And until I moved here, so right now I'm living in Urbana side. I realized, wait, there's a place called Chinook's. I can buy like really fresh stuff. Like it's way closer to where I'm living compared to Walmart. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Any of your favorite restaurant? I asked this question to Professor Blake last time, so I think I'll probably continue asking this question for all the professors joining our chat.
Yeah, I have a number of favorite restaurants. I like for Chinese food, I like Golden Harbor.
Wow, that's a great place.
For barbecue, I like Black Dog. Where else do I like to go? Oh, I like a couple of Indian food places in town too. So, uh, actually, of course, I don't go eat out these days, but I do pick up food and still manage to get restaurant food from time to time.
Wow, I think that's pretty much all the question I have for this interview. Well, thank you so much for sharing the time with us and sharing your amazing life story. I definitely have no idea you've been through so many things, and that's one of the purposes we have these kind of chats. Like, because I find out probably all the professors, all the faculty members have some amazing stories that's waiting to share. Yeah,
Yes, if you keep doing this, I'm sure you will find yourself surprised.
thank you so much, Professor.
My pleasure.
Yeah, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
From the hills of Kentucky to the cornfields of Urbana, what an amazing story. Professor's path was one of the ultimate comeback stories I've ever heard, and it's cooler now that he can say it with ease. If you ever see him driving his modified 1974 MGB on campus, don't forget to wave and say hi. For next time, we have Professor Blake Johnson sharing his vision of education and the challenges he had overcome to be where he's at today. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned in After Hours.